Pattaya. For some people, it's Thailand's most controversial city, a place known worldwide for nightlife, neon lights, beach bars, walking street, and a reputation that attracts millions of curious tourists every single year. But behind the party atmosphere, there's an entire hidden world most visitors don't fully understand, especially when it comes to freelancers. Because despite what many tourists assume, the reality is far more complicated than the internet makes it seem. There are unspoken rules, safety concerns, scams, emotional misunderstandings, cultural differences, and financial expectations many first-time visitors are completely unprepared for. And if you rely only on random YouTube videos or online forums, you'll probably get a very distorted view of what Pattaya is actually like, because most people only show one side of the story. So today, we're talking honestly about what freelancers in Pattaya want tourists to understand, including how pricing usually works, the mistakes foreigners constantly make, and why many visitors leave Thailand completely misunderstanding the people they met there. Because whether people admit it or not, Pattaya operates by its own social system, and if you don't understand that system, you can easily end up confused, manipulated, broke, emotionally attached, or even unsafe. First, freelancer doesn't mean what many tourists think. This is where most confusion starts. In Pattaya, the word freelancer is commonly used to describe women who work independently instead of being directly attached to bars or clubs. But that doesn't automatically mean every person operates the same way. Some work occasionally, some work full-time, some are connected to nightlife venues informally. Others use dating apps, social media, or personal contacts, and many have completely different financial situations, motivations, and personal boundaries. That's important because tourists often treat freelancers like a single category, but the reality is much more complicated. Some are supporting families, some are paying university tuition, some are escaping debt, some genuinely enjoy nightlife culture, and others are simply trying to survive economically in a tourism-driven city. Pattaya's nightlife economy exists because demand exists, and many people involved are navigating difficult financial realities outsiders never see. The biggest misunderstanding: tourists think it's always easy. This is one of the biggest lies social media creates. Online videos often make Pattaya nightlife look simple. Show up, spend money, party non-stop, no complications, no consequences. But reality is different, because emotions, expectations, and misunderstandings get involved very quickly. Some tourists arrive believing every interaction is genuine romance. Others assume everything is completely fake. Usually, the truth sits somewhere in the middle, and this is where many foreigners get emotionally confused, especially older tourists or lonely travelers. Because Pattaya can create a very intense emotional environment: attention, affection, compliments, companionship, physical closeness. For some visitors, especially those lacking connection back home, that attention feels incredibly real. And sometimes parts of it are real. But tourists often forget something important. This is also work, and once money becomes connected to emotional attention, things become psychologically complicated very fast. That's why experienced travelers constantly warn newcomers: don't confuse temporary attention with long-term emotional commitment, because many people arrive in Pattaya looking for escape and end up emotionally attached far faster than expected. So how do prices usually work? This is the question tourists search online constantly. And while prices vary massively depending on location, venue, timing, age, appearance, and expectations, there are still general patterns. In Pattaya nightlife areas, freelancer pricing usually depends on short time, long time, location, hotel policies, transportation, and whether drinks or entertainment costs are included. In higher-end clubs or rooftop venues, prices are usually significantly higher. In smaller beer bars or less tourist-heavy areas, prices may be lower. But one important thing many tourists misunderstand is this: the visible price is often not the full cost, because nightlife spending adds up very quickly. Drinks, bar fines, transportation, tips, food, hotel guest fees in some cases, late-night spending, and emotional spending. That last part matters more than people realize, because many tourists start spending impulsively once emotions get involved, especially if they begin trying to save someone financially or build deeper attachment. And Pattaya has countless stories of foreigners losing enormous amounts of money after becoming emotionally invested too quickly. Scams exist, but so does tourist manipulation. This part is important. Yes, scams absolutely happen in Pattaya. Fake emergencies, invented family problems, pressure for money, luxury shopping requests, phone scams, emotional manipulation. Tourists should absolutely stay cautious. But at the same time, some tourists behave badly too. Very badly. Some treat local women disrespectfully. Some refuse agreed payments. Some become aggressive or controlling. Others act entitled simply because money is involved. And many freelancers quietly deal with difficult or dangerous tourists constantly. That's why trust becomes complicated on both sides. Because both sides often enter interactions expecting manipulation, which creates a very strange emotional environment overall. And this is something outsiders rarely understand. Pattaya's nightlife world runs heavily on performance, negotiation, emotional reading, and social survival. Much more than tourists realize. Pattaya is not fake Thailand. Many travelers make this mistake. They visit Pattaya, see the nightlife, and assume the entire country works the same way. It doesn't. Pattaya is one small part of Thailand, and it operates very differently from normal Thai society in many ways. Tourism heavily shapes behavior there, especially in nightlife zones. But outside those areas, Thailand is often far more conservative, traditional, and family-oriented than visitors expect. That's why many Thai people themselves view Pattaya as a separate environment entirely, almost like its own bubble. And tourists who only experience Thailand through Pattaya often leave with a deeply distorted understanding of Thai culture, because the real Thailand is much bigger than nightlife, streets, and entertainment districts. Many freelancers want respect more than anything. This surprises many tourists, because outsiders often reduce nightlife workers to stereotypes. But many freelancers say the biggest thing they want from foreigners is simple. Basic respect, not being treated like objects, not being insulted, not being publicly humiliated, not being treated as less intelligent, and not being viewed as disposable. Because regardless of why someone entered nightlife work, they're still human beings navigating real-life pressures. And many are extremely emotionally intelligent. They learn quickly how to read people. Who's safe? Who's dangerous? Who's lonely? Who's drunk? Who's emotionally unstable? Who's pretending to be rich? Who's likely to become possessive? Pattaya nightlife teaches survival skills very quickly, especially for women working around intoxicated tourists every night. And many freelancers become highly skilled at understanding psychology because they have to. The internet romanticizes Pattaya too much. This is another major issue. Online content creators often portray Pattaya in extreme ways, either as paradise or total disaster. But reality is more complicated. Some tourists genuinely have fun and respectful experiences. Others become financially reckless. Some develop unhealthy emotional dependencies. Some feel lonely even while surrounded by nightlife. And others leave realizing the fantasy they imagined never really existed. Because Pattaya often sells an illusion of endless excitement. But eventually, many visitors realize constant stimulation can become emotionally empty too. That's why long-term travelers often say Pattaya feels very different after the first few visits. The fantasy starts fading, and people begin seeing the city more realistically. So what should tourists actually understand? Honestly, the biggest thing is this. Pattaya is still real life. Even if it sometimes feels disconnected from reality, the people there are real people, with bills, families, stress, dreams, regrets, financial pressure, and complicated lives outside nightlife. And tourists who understand that usually navigate the city much more responsibly. They avoid fantasy thinking, avoid emotional impulsiveness, avoid disrespect, and avoid treating nightlife like a video game with no consequences. Because the moment people forget there are actual humans involved, that's when things usually go wrong. Final thoughts. Pattaya will probably always remain controversial. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people judge it without understanding it. And others become obsessed with it far too deeply. But behind all the neon lights and viral YouTube videos, there's a much more complicated reality most tourists never fully see. A city built around tourism, fantasy, economics, loneliness, entertainment, and survival all mixed together. And the people working inside that world, many of them simply want tourists to understand one thing. The nightlife may look like a game from the outside, but for the people living inside it,